Hi, and welcome to the Buena Vista Audubon Nature Center. We're sorry your school can't come in person today and have a real field trip with us, but since you can't, we're going to do a virtual trip today. We're going to start first inside our nature center, and then we'll go for a walk along the lagoon trail. Let's go inside. Here are some of our taxidermied animals that we're going to talk about. Before we start talking about each individual animal, though, first think, what do all living things need to live? Can you think of some things? What do humans need to live? What do animals need too? Food. We all need food to eat. And clean water. We call it potable water when it's water that we can drink, nice and clean. And when we go out on the lagoon, we're going to see what water there is for these animals to drink. What else is needed? We all live in some kind of house, don't we? Whether we live in an apartment or a condo, what kind of house? Animals need shelter too. And for animals, we'll look and see what kind of shelter is available outside here. The last thing that animals need is lots of clean air, sunshine, and space to live. And those are all things the lagoon provides. These are animals that might even be common in your backyards, but the lagoon is a little special because it's really made just for them. First of all, let's talk about this animal. It's a bird. Do you know what kind of bird? Yes, it's a duck. Do you know what kind of duck? This is called a mallard duck. And you can tell it's a male mallard because of its coloring. Often birds, the male has the more brilliant colored feathers and the female has quieter colors, like the mallard female is sort of brown and gray. And ducks are water birds. These ducks have webbed feet that make them really good swimmers. They have bills that are made just perfectly for dabbling down in the water with their heads and necks, grabbing some plant life under the water to eat. The water goes back out of their bill, but then they eat the greenery. Maybe you've been to a duck pond, but remember that birds like this don't eat bread naturally. They need green plants. So let's don't feed them bread. Take some old lettuce torn up or some frozen peas or something instead. That's better for wildlife. Okay, next we have a raccoon. Isn't he beautiful? Raccoons are nighttime animals. They prefer to be out and active when it's darker. And unlike the duck, which is a daytime animal, they're active in the day. They call that diurnal. And what do they call it when you're active at night? Nocturnal, yes. The raccoon is a very common animal in our area. You can recognize him by his dark coloring around his eyes that look like a mask and his ringed, striped tail. And he has claws that look very much like a human hand with long fingers. Maybe we will see some tracks in the mud of the raccoon. And raccoons eat almost everything, maybe even your trash, but at the lagoon, they like to eat the little crayfish that swim around in the freshwater pond. So sometimes we see crayfish shells out on the trail. Then up here, we have a couple of owls. This one is called the great horned owl, though those feathers on the top of his head are just feathers, not horns. And this one is called a barn owl. Now, we all know the sound that we think of owls making. What do we typically think of the owl making? The hoo, hoo, right? That's the hoot of the great horned owl. The barn owl has a totally different sound. It's more of a screechy sound because all birds sound differently. They all have their unique calls, which is sort of interesting. Even sometimes if you're a good birder, you don't see the bird. If you hear it, you're going to know what kind of bird that is. So our job today is to go out on the trail now and see if we can find evidence of these animals. Maybe we'll see their tracks. Maybe we'll hear them. Maybe we'll see food remains or places where other animals have eaten on leaves or left litter on the ground. So next, let's go outside. We're down here at the kiosk that has lots of information about the lagoon if you want to stop here first when you come with your family or friends. We're right across from the visitor center. It's just on the other side of the parking lot. And we have information about birds, about the trail itself, and some plants you might see. And those are in Spanish or English. So if you do come by the lagoon, think about picking one of those up before you start down the trail. We're going to have me telling the story today, so here we go. We've left behind the parking lot and the cement sidewalk, and now we're going to head down the nature trail. You can see now we have dirt under our feet instead of cement, and we've left it much more natural than a park or maybe your schoolyard. We aren't mowing the lawn every week. We're not pruning every branch. We're trying to leave things a little more natural for both the animals and people to enjoy. Here we go. We're standing under the beautiful Torrey pine trees here at our lagoon. Pine trees are different than some other trees. They don't have leaves. They have what we call needles. They're long and slender. And the tree is so big and majestically beautiful. Think of all the shade it provides on a hot day, or the protection on a rainy day for animals that are sitting or nesting underneath it. Oh, I see a bird up in a branch. Come on over and I'll show you what grows on a pine tree. Pine trees make pine cones. It takes 2 full years for a pine cone to develop. This one maybe has been around for a while and has even been eaten, maybe by a squirrel or some other critter looking for the pine nuts that grow inside it. This one is a little bit more recently fallen off the tree. But they make nuts that are in each little section, and that makes great food for animals. Here's a close-up of one of the pine needles. They come in groups. Next time you come, pick up a bundle of needles and see how many are in a bundle. And I'm putting everything I touch back down on the ground. We want to make sure to leave nature just as we found it. We're on a new section of our trail. You can go straight right here, or you can take a left into the new live oak grove. Maybe when you come, you'll look for that opening right at the toyon bush. Do you see this beautiful shrub that has red berries in winter? And what do you think might like to eat those berries? I have seen lots of birds enjoying them. And how about, do you think birds might use a bush like this to make a nest? Yeah, lovely branches that would hold a nest nice and secure. So we found some food and we've found some shelter for some of the animals that live here. Now let's walk into the grove. We're under several oak trees as well as more toyon bushes here. And look at how nice and secluded it would be here for an animal to make a nest at the base of a tree or under some leaves. Oh, I heard a bird right up in this tree. Did you hear it? There he goes. Maybe he has a nest right up here in this tree. And look at the ground. Notice all the leaves that have fallen off over the years and made this beautiful leaf litter, perfect for beetles or ants to make a nest under. We have to remember insects are animals too, and they live here at the lagoon with us. You can probably tell we're in a little different habitat now. We're down among the reeds of the lagoon. The trail here was built up so we can walk right out into the lagoon area. Over here, you're going to see that there is a little pathway that goes to the open water. And this isn't made for people, is it? It's a small little path that was probably made by a raccoon or a possum or a skunk that was going down to the shallow water to look for some food to eat. Or perhaps there's a duck that has a nest down there in those reeds. Who do you think might live down there? This is our first dock that lets you get a view of the pond out over the water. Here we have some open water where sometimes we see a turtle's head going by, or some ducks or coots or other water birds out on the water. And you can see that we're surrounded by all kinds of reeds. There's this one that's very tall and slender, that's called a bulrush. And there's this one that has a long flat leaf, that's called a cattail. And if you don't know what a cattail is, later on I'll show you what kind of flower they have. How deep do you think that water is out in the lagoon? Not very. It's probably only 3 or 4 feet deep. Perfect for birds that like shallow water to dive and dabble for food. Let's walk on. Here's another pathway that animals are using to access the lagoon to get down to where they can find some crayfish to eat or a place to nest on the side of the reeds. I see something interesting over here. Come a little closer and look. There's an area down here in the mud where there's no reeds growing. It sort of looks like some animals might have been having a tussle there. Maybe a coyote grabbed a squirrel right there, or a raccoon was down thinking about making a nest there. What could you think could have been happening down there in that mud where it looks like perhaps an animal was making footprints? Also, right around here, when there's standing water, sometimes you get a bad smell. That's because in standing water, the plants start to decay and rot, and we get some bad odors out of that. See, you don't get to smell that today, but maybe you will when you come. Let's walk down farther. Can you tell I'm standing on a bridge here, so I'm able to stand where there's standing water. And the cattails are rustling around me. Can you hear them in the breeze? Listen and see if you can hear any birds chirping as well. And this is where you do smell a little bit of a stinky odor. You can see that the water is very shallow here. It's probably only about 5 or 6 inches deep. Sometimes we see little fish in this water, or we'll see a crayfish swimming around. Do you see anything down there? This is also a place where often we see insects like dragonflies hovering about, but they're more prevalent in the summer, not so much in the winter. I hear a bird calling. I think that's the red-winged blackbird. We're standing in what we like to call Cattail Alley because there are cattails on our left and cattails on our right. And cattails are a reed that like to grow with their feet right in water. Not all plants like that, do they? I picked a couple of the cattail flowers just to show you. Not that you would pick them, I only picked them to show a group. But you can see that their flower is tight on the stalk, sort of like a cat's tail or a hot dog on a stick perhaps. But in the fall, they start to fall apart and make this interesting fluff that's full of seeds and that will start new cattail plants next year. I'm going to put these back down. Remember, we leave everything here. We don't take anything with us. I want to show you this plant that's an interesting one that likes to grow in wetland soil. It's called pickleweed, and interestingly, it changes color during the season. It starts out green, but as it sucks up salts from the soil, it often turns red in some of its segments. There's lots more insects to see on the lemonade berry bush. It's very popular with the bees right now. I must see 20 or 30 bees right here on this blooming shrub. So lemonade berries, how do you think they got their name? Can you imagine? Right now they're just starting to bloom, but in 2 or 3 months there's going to be a red sticky berry on there. And yes, they taste a little bit like a sour lemon if you just touched it a little bit to your tongue. The bees are sure enjoying being here, pollinating, and also probably going back to their hive and making some honey, because these look like honey bees. We're almost done with our trail walk. I hope you had a good time going around the trail with me today, and I hope you'll really think about coming and enjoying it with your family in the future. The trail is open dawn to dusk, so come sometime and enjoy it. But if you can't get to the lagoon, there are areas to explore nature in your backyard too. In your backyard, yes, or around the block, or in your neighborhood park. Just get outside and look for some birds or some insects and enjoy nature. Thank you for coming on this walk with us today, and we'll hope to see you back at the Nature Center next year.